It's your girl Sacagawea, or is it Sacagawea? Either way, we gon' pronounce it with a hard G. So listen to my story about me and my baby. Sacagawea, yes, that is me. Or is it Sacagawea? We gon' pronounce it with a hard G, cause I'm a G. Give me my props, don't be shady. Yes, I'm a G. And so is my baby. Strapped him on my back, he was a couple of days old. Pull up a chair, listen while my story unfolds. I was living with a Frenchman named Charbonneau, but the Shoshone tribe was my original crew. Anywho, here we are up in North Dakota, when a group of white men invited themselves over. Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, they were explorers. Core of discovery is what we can call them. President Jefferson wanted to explore the Northwest, sent them on a mission to document more of the U.S. So here they are, 1804, no GPS or even cars, without a clue on what to do till they met me in Charbonneau. You know what I did, gathered my things and my kid. I know this land and this language like the back of my eyelids. Without me, these white men couldn't make it on Sacagawea. This is my chance, I had to take. Here we go, exploring the American Northwest. The boy needed my help because I'm the best. You better give me my props, better know how to act. Sacagawea, I'm the girl with the baby on the back. Here we go, exploring the American Northwest. The boy needed my help because I'm the best. Better give me my props, you better know how to act. Sacagawea did it all with the baby on my back. And the journey was hard, and the journey was long, but you know I held it down to prove my value was strong. Now we reached the Rocky Mountains, but couldn't get across it. Had to trade our things for some goods and some horses. We might have ended up like some corpses. Luckily, the people that we met turned out my brother was the bossman. Hadn't seen him since I was kidnapped at age 11. Crossing the mountains was like crossing into the gates of heaven. Now we pulled up to the Pacific Ocean. Ever so thankful they took directions that I told them. This is something that I never seen before. It was so beautiful, had to pick my whole jaw all up off the floor. Lewis and Clark made their westward advancements. Flora and Fauna recorded it all in transit. Back to Washington with gifts of knowledge and abundance. But without me, man, they couldn't have done this. Unknowingly, this led to Native American desecration. All for expansions and U.S. exploration. Can you blame me? I really thought I had a cause. They pay Charbonneau and land and money. They ain't pay me at all. Did it all with the baby on my collarbone. Now my memory's sitting pretty on the U.S. dollar coin. But y'all know me, Sacagawea with a hard G. Give me my props and don't be shady. Make way for me and my baby. Here we go, exploring the American Northwest. The whole needed my help because I'm the best. You better give me my props, better know how to act. Sacagawea, I'm the girl with the baby on the back. Here we go, exploring the American Northwest. The whole needed my help because I'm the best. Better give me my props, you better know how to act. Sacagawea did it all with the baby on my back. Did it all with the baby on my back. Did it all with the baby on my back like that. You better know how to act. Sacagawea, I'm the girl with the baby on the back.
All right, I thought you'd want to see that maybe one more time. That's a good song, isn't it? I like that version of, here we go. I like that version of the song about Sacagawea. It's cool. I like it a lot. We're going to read today. I hope you had a good weekend, but we're going to get back into our Lewis and Clark study today in the Louisiana Purchase. So we're going to read today a little text called Exploring the Purchase, very similar to what we read from your textbook last week. And then today we'll have some questions on this text like we normally do with this kind of text. So let's get started reading, and you'll need to listen closely. And the next few slides will be pictures that are on the screen right now. So you can go back after I read it, reread it yourself if you would like to. And here we go. In 1800, the United States consisted of 16 states, plus territories south and west of those states. The western boundary of the U.S. was the Mississippi River, which flowed south to New Orleans. New Orleans and the land west of the Mississippi River was controlled by Spain in the 1790s and by France after Spain sold it in 1801. So the pink up here, if you look on this map, that's all the United States was in 1800. Okay, the pink area. Spain owned the yellowish area. Then France owned this purpley area. This was a huge problem for the new American nation. All the rivers immediately west of the Appalachian Mountains, such as the Ohio, the Tennessee, and the Cumberland, eventually flow into the Mississippi River, and therefore to New Orleans. Since the best way to transport goods, such as wood, corn, and cotton, was downriver. That meant that everything produced by the settlers who lived along rivers such as the Ohio, Tennessee, and Cumberland had to be pushed and pulled over the mountains to be traded with other Americans. But the more convenient route downstream was through the foreign port of New Orleans. Remember we talked about that on Thursday, I believe it was. If you were a farmer in this area and you wanted to share your crops up north or on the coast, if you went east, you'd have to cross the Appalachian Mountains. It was just too hard. The easiest thing to do would be take your crops west, because this land is flat, more flat than the mountains for sure, and get it on a boat, take it down the Mississippi River through New Orleans, and that boat goes all the way up here. Take it that way. But you can't do it if this port is closed because France owns it. This worried many Americans, the most important being George Washington. The Western settlers stand, as it were, upon a pivot, he said in a letter to the governor of Virginia. The touch of a feather would turn them any way. In other words, thought Washington, American settlers west of the mountains might end up on friendlier terms with a foreign country such as Spain or France than they were with their fellow Americans in the East. Then in 1803, something my goodness. Then in 1803, something unexpected happened. Napoleon Bonaparte, the ruler of France, offered to sell the entire Louisiana territory to the United States for $15 million. President Thomas Jefferson asked Congress to approve the purchase, and it did after a debate. Federalists argued that the Constitution didn't give the president the authority to do this, which is why several members of Congress voted against it. However, the Louisiana purchase doubled the size of the United States. President Jefferson, who was very interested in animals and plants, wanted to explore this new territory himself. But as president, he had to send others. Jefferson chose an aide and a friend of his named Meriwether Lewis to explore the Louisiana territory. Lewis asked his friend William Clark to help. By the time Lewis and Clark set off from St. Louis in May 1804, they had about 30 others, almost all of them soldiers. The entire expedition became known as the Corps of Discovery. There's that word again. Looks like corpse. The P and the S are silent. Just the Corps of Discovery. It took Lewis and Clark nearly a year to make it up the Missouri River. For months, they paddled, poled, and once you got a big pole and you're pushing along the bottom to make your boat go, and dragged boats through the present-day states of Missouri, Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota, and North Dakota. Along the way, they made detailed notes and drawings about the plants and the animals they found. They even caught a prairie dog and sent it back in a cage to President Jefferson. After it got too cold to travel any farther, they built shelters and spent the winter in a place called Fort Mandan. In present-day Montana, they reached the Rocky Mountains, which they could see were much larger than anything in the east. Leaving their boats behind, they continued through present-day Idaho and Washington and reached the Pacific Ocean in September 1806, 28 months after leaving St. Louis. The members of the Lewis and Clark group met many Native Americans on their long journey. The best remembered was a young Shoshone Indian woman named Sacagawea, who was married to a French trapper. Sacagawea helped Lewis and Clark trade with Native Americans they met along the way. When other American Indians saw Sacagawea and her baby in the Lewis and Clark expedition, they probably assumed that such a group was harmless. This may have had a lot to do with the fact that only one man died on the expedition, and he of disease. Sacagawea also helped them as a scout. The Indian woman, Sacagawea, recognized the point of the high plain to our right, which she informed us was not very distant from the summer retreat of her nation on a river beyond the mountains which run to the west, Lewis wrote in one of his many journals along the way. So just another little lesson on Lewis and Clark's expedition. Very interesting expedition, and neat to hear how Sacagawea helped. She looks older in this picture, doesn't she? I think we read the other day that she might have just been 25 when she died. But a lot to learn about Lewis and Clark. They learned a lot about the land. You've got some questions today. You might want to go and do some research sometime on Lewis and Clark. And they put journals. You might can find their drawings of different animals. You could even go in the search bar and type in animals that Lewis and Clark discovered and see the prairie dog and other things. There's a story about a grizzly bear. They discovered a grizzly bear, and the grizzly bear started chasing them. And one of the army men with them who the grizzly bear was chasing shot the grizzly bear, but the grizzly bear didn't even stop running. It was such a big, strong bear. It just continued running at him. And all of those that it was chasing, they jumped off of a waterfall. They didn't die. They just did it to get away from the bear. So there's lots of cool stories about the Lewis and Clark expedition you might can find just doing a little research on your own sometime if you're interested in them. Okay, well, today I want you to go and answer the questions about the text we just read as we continue to learn more about how our country is growing.